Good morning. I'll be reading Matthew 2, verses 1 through 12. You can read along in your Bibles or you can follow along on the screens. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose, and we've come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me, so that I too may go and worship him." After they had heard the king, they went on their way. And the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. This is the word of the Lord. My 3-year-old granddaughter attended our Parents' Day Out program here, which I'm also blessed to be able to run. And that meant that during the Christmas play, after some negotiation, because she really would have preferred to wear a zebra costume, she agreed to be the donkey. Now, every year, our threes class acts out the nativity scene, and Miss Shelley, who's been on our staff for 27 years, has got this down. So Celine Dion is singing "Oh Holy Night" in the background, and each child in their costume walks in over here and comes over here and poses for the camera for Mom and Dad, and then they go and they take their spot. It's adorable. The parents eat it up. When it came time to rehearse this year, though, we couldn't find the baby or the manger anywhere. Luckily, we do have other dolls. So Miss Shelley found a smaller doll in a basket in our stash, and so she brought them up, and they started their rehearsal. Well, my little donkey couldn't resist. She took one look at that baby, and she grabbed him, and she ran down the center aisle. Y'all, she kidnapped baby Jesus. So it kind of became important for me to look for the bigger, less easy to kidnap baby Jesus. Started looking everywhere. I called Phyllis, I called Jeff. Where could it be? Well, I thought I'd looked everywhere, but Jeff reminded me that we have that creepy boiler room down there, so maybe I should look there. I didn't want to. And at this point, I had Emerson with me, so I had to go down there and pretend I was brave because we can't both be scared. So I walked down there into the boiler room. It's not there. But there's a creepier room even farther past the boiler room, and that's where the manger was, under a pile of plastic bags. So I lift all the plastic bags, no baby. That's when Emerson, who I'm pretty sure was projecting, said, "The kids have stolen him." Well, I had to stop laughing and grabbed up the manger and walked it out to the hallway. I assured her the baby was not stolen, that we would find him somewhere. And all I could think to do was retrace all my steps and look in all the places I'd already looked before. So one of those places was a cabinet where we keep our costumes for the Living Nativity. I opened the cabinet, and she yells, "There he is!" And she was right. I mean, my eyes are up here, but her eyes are down here. And he was tucked up underneath all of the long gowns and everything. I just didn't see him. So I was so relieved we got to have the show yet. But as I grabbed him up, she says, "I want him." I don't say no to this child, guys. This was hard. So I had to look at her and go, "Honey, this baby Jesus belongs to the church. You can't have this." So from that point on, she had a one-item Christmas list. She wanted baby Jesus. 2 weeks later, in her class Christmas party, she received a baby doll from Miss Shelley because Miss Shelley is a saint, and she buys every child in that class a Christmas present every single year. She promptly named her baby doll Jesus, and she was so excited. She showed it to everybody. She even shared it briefly with Miss Judy in the office and allowed Miss Judy to feed baby Jesus, which I thought was very big of her. So on the way home, she's babbling on and on and on about that baby doll. She's so happy, so happy. And then she got super sad really quick, just like a 3-year-old can. Nobody else can switch on a dime like a 3-year-old. And she yells, "Oh no, baby Jesus belongs to the church. I have to bring him back." Well, I had to laugh because I knew exactly where she got that idea. And I felt like I'd accidentally sort of planted this landmine of theological mistake. So I backtracked and I said, "No, sweetie, that baby Jesus belongs to you because Miss Shelley gave it to you. The doll that we used in the church, that belongs to the church. But the real baby Jesus, he belongs to everybody." We even set up our nativity scenes to illustrate that. The poor, uneducated Jewish shepherds are standing alongside the rich, wise Gentile magi because, after all, the angels said that they had good news for all the people. Now, because tomorrow is the Feast of the Epiphany, the day that the church set aside to celebrate the Magi's visit, I thought we'd look into them for a bit. Now, we don't know much more about them than what Matthew had to say. Over time, so, we don't like mystery, we like to fill in the gaps. The artists and the storytellers who dealt with that story, they added a few things. In fact, they were so good at embellishing the story that there are a number of Bible scholars who will tell you they don't think it's true at all. They think that Matthew sort of created that as a parable to sort of run up the score, add even more prophecies to the list of prophecies that Jesus' birth fulfilled. So they would have known, his audience were the Jews, and they would have known the prophecies, including the prophecies about somebody coming from afar to bring gifts. I had to know, were they real? Did they eagerly search for the baby like Emerson did? And if they did, why? Because, that wasn't their country. They were from somewhere else. Matthew says they're from the East, right? So I found a book. This book is by Father Dwight Longnecker, and it is called Mystery of the Magi, The Quest to Identify the Three Wise Men. And he suggests that they were real, but that many of the things we've come to believe about them, they're not quite so true. Like, for example, we don't know that there were 3. We just know they brought 3 gifts. We don't know that they came on camels. I have to have camels in my nativity scene, I'm sorry. But he says they could have come on horseback. We don't know how far away they came. In fact, he says, tradition says Persia or Arabia, India, Mongolia, China, East Africa, someplace far away. But he points out that when you're in America today and you say the South, everybody knows you mean one of the southeastern states. You're talking about Georgia or Mississippi or Alabama or Louisiana. Well, when Matthew wrote, when you said the East, right away that would have triggered everybody to think about the land just the other side of the Jordan River, the land just the other side of the Dead Sea. So if that's true, he's thinking maybe they didn't travel quite so far. And he found a couple of cities that he thinks might be where they came from, Petra in Jordan or Taima in northeast Arabia. Now, the reason why he thinks so is those places were very cosmopolitan because they were on a trading route for incense. And that meant lots of people from different cultures were coming back and forth. And that meant that these folks would have known about other religions and therefore would have known about the prophecies for the child to come. They would have probably known about what the Magi from Persia did to divine the future from the stars. And guess what they traded from those cities? Frankincense and myrrh. Now, if he's right, that means they traveled 3 to 5 days. Not a huge trip, but still, I kind of like that trip. That's still a decent pilgrimage, right? Except that Longnecker doesn't think it was a pilgrimage. He's trying to ruin my Christmas, guys. Longnecker thinks that these Magi probably worked for King Aretas IV, who was the king of the Nabateans. And in that case, when the king realized that there was a newborn king somewhere in a neighboring country, he needed somebody to go on a diplomatic mission to go and bring his best wishes, to set him up in good favor for the future. If that's true, that means they went on a business trip. That's not very exciting. But he didn't ruin the end of the story for me, and I don't want you to miss this. Herod, to whom they would have had a diplomatic obligation, told them to return to him with information about where the child was so he could visit and worship the baby too. But the Magi were told in a dream to return home another way, so that's what they did. That's exactly what they did. They are yet another example of people in the Bible who, once they encounter God, change their path. Meeting the divine changes things. That may be why, in the weeks between Epiphany and Ash Wednesday, we in the church, especially in children's ministry, spend a lot of time talking about all the ways in which Jesus revealed his divinity to the people around him. We talk about when he was lost in the temple as a young boy. We talk about when he was baptized. We talk about his temptation in the desert. We talk about his first miracles. Because each of these things are sort of an aha moment or an epiphany that, if you're paying attention, would lead you to realize that Jesus is so much more than he seems. But I wonder if we adults are just too jaded for an aha moment. I mean, are we really seeking Jesus, or is the practice of our religion just business as usual? Frankly, the Jesus business can be pretty lucrative. This, which is hard to see, but trust me, it's a shoe. This is the Jesus shoe. It started out as a $160 pair of Nike Air Max 97s. There's a company in Brooklyn that decided back in August in a brainstorming session that they wanted to do something different, something really interesting. And somebody in the brainstorming session says, I'm just so sick of collaborations. Sooner or later, somebody's going to tell you they collaborated with Jesus Christ himself and take that product to market. And somebody else in the room said, we could do that. And so they did. They decided to buy 20 pairs of these shoes. They happened to have a friend who lives in Israel. So they sent the friend to the Jordan River and said, send us a gallon of water from the Jordan River. Once they got that water back in the States, they had a priest bless it. They dyed it blue. They took something to inject it into those little air pockets at the bottom of the shoe so that you could literally be walking on water. Then they took and they put a crucifix on the top of the shoe, and they had somebody print up these little stickers they put on the side that said Matthew 14:25, which is the passage about Jesus walking on water. The product was ready in October. They put it online to sell for $1,425 a pair, because the Bible passage is Matthew 14:25. In 1 minute, they sold out. Gone. Completely gone. Then some of the folks who bought that $14,025 pair of shoes resold them for up to $4,000 a pair. Why? Because out there are some people who really do think that you can own a piece of Jesus. And you know what? I could be one of them. I mean, I didn't buy those shoes, honest, but this bracelet has a cross on it. This bracelet is a reference to one of my favorite Bible verses. I have crosses on my walls at home. I have crosses and a picture of Jesus on the wall downstairs. I have cross necklaces. I have cross T-shirts. I have slightly more subtle references to my faith in other decorations and clothing. I don't really have any idea how many Bibles I own, because I went for a time where I bought a new Bible every year, and then I went for a time where I bought a new Bible in every translation. And of course, then there's all these books that people who are Christian write that I just have to own and read. So I really don't know how much money I've spent over the years on Jesus materials, but it's been a lot. Still, owning all those things isn't the same thing as making him my God. If my path isn't changed like the wise men's path, then none of that stuff in my house or in my office really matters. Now, Jesus merchandise is not new, and much of it comes from a place that's, really good intentions. Over the centuries, the church commissioned art in which Jesus is depicted to look like the people they were trying to reach, which is why you see so many nativity scenes with a blonde-haired, blue-eyed baby Jesus when he came from the Middle East, and let's face it, he probably didn't have blonde hair and blue eyes. And, I guess in and of itself, it's not really that harmful to misrepresent Jesus' looks, but we don't stop at misrepresenting Jesus by his outward appearance. We also like to portray Jesus as just exactly as petty as we are. We humbly acknowledge that we have been forgiven, and then we refuse to believe or even entertain the notion that others are forgiven for doing the things that we wouldn't do or for doing things to us. We try so very hard to make Jesus just like us. And in doing that, we create barriers for people who don't yet believe. And worse still, we create idols that are sort of a hybrid of ourselves and God. We have to learn to worship Jesus for who he really is and not who we pretend he is just so we'll feel better about ourselves. We don't own Jesus, so we don't get to define Jesus. Jesus is supposed to be defining us. Now, I know some of y'all know I'm a Disney fan. Probably my favorite Disney movie is The Lion King. There is a scene in that movie where Mufasa, or the memory of him, appears to his son Simba, and he advises him, remember who you are. Now, Simba needs to remember that because he's got a job to do. His pride needs his help. He needs to go back and take his place in the family to protect them and to guide them. Now, when I'm talking with my kids, even though they're adults now, I often forget that they're adults and I give them more advice than they even wanted. I often flip that script just a bit, and I advise them to remember whose they are. Because it's a healthy bit of perspective, I think, to remember the promise that they will be my people and I will be their God. Whose God is it anyway? The shepherds, the Magi's, Emerson's, the churches? Perhaps the more important question isn't to whom God belongs, but who belongs to God. For many of us, it's almost time to put away the manger scene and all the other reminders of the Nativity. But I pray we don't slip back into business as usual. Instead, my prayer for you this new year is that you'll have an aha moment, or as many aha moments as it takes, to set you on the path that God has planned for you, the path that lets you and everyone around you know for certain that you belong to God and that they do too. Amen.